Hello, welcome to Chat GCP, a medical science clinical research and commercialization podcast with me, your host, Charles Beasley. On today's episode, we have Abbas Al-Murrani. Abbas is the Managing Director and Health Economist at Health Economics Consulting New Zealand. Abbas, great to have you in the chat, mate.
Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome.
Really appreciate it.
Fantastic. So health economics is a topic that's quite close to my heart. I did my master's many moons ago in this topic. I developed a silly little pharmacoeconomic model for a small pharmaceutical company back in the day.
Awesome.
And I'm quite surprised that since 2013, I can't say that there has been much happening in this space in New Zealand. It seems very parochial, shall we say. How did you get into this industry?
Yeah, I mean, look, the system doesn't formally produce health economists. You kind of have to be a health economist, or you have to be an economist interested in health. It's typically how it's sort of started. And so at the time, I had a degree in public health, and I was working at Princess Margaret Hospital in Christchurch. And I was doing public health things, and it was awesome at the time. But the young fellow that got promoted into a senior public health position, young Cantabrian, super awesome, but I knew he wasn't going anywhere anytime soon. So career progression sort of hit a halt. And at the time, I asked the health system, Greg Hamilton, I believe my manager was, great guy. I said, what does the health system need? And he said, oh, look, we need health economists because we outsource a lot of that work, and they don't really understand the health system the way that we want them to understand it with equity and the Treaty of Waitangi, and other complexities that are unique to New Zealand. And so I thought, okay, that'd be a good time to sort of go back and do a master's and pursue the economics part. And then I sort of merged the two worlds together. But I was the only guy in my class that was an economist who was interested in health. Yeah. My friends and colleagues ended up at Reserve Bank, Treasury, top four, EY, PwC, sort of consulting type work.
Nice. And do we need more health economics, you think, after, all this
They're
time?
biased, but yeah, no, we definitely do. We definitely do. And it won't happen until, we sort of get them through the university. We need the universities on board for sure to be able to produce local health economists, or we bring them from overseas. Is the only other alternative, really.
Yeah. So why is health economics so important? I mean, why do we need to know about it? Why should we care? I mean, if decisions have been made for the last 10, 15, 20, 30 years without health economists,
Sure. Look, I mean, the system has been coping without them. If we are not producing them, there's going to be no demand for them, really. But essentially, health economics is a framework for decision making. It's consistent, it's reliable, it's transparent. So you're able to make good investment decisions in healthcare if you have a foundation of health economics. If you're not using health economics to make decisions, you're going to have some spurious results, or sort of long-term investment decisions that don't really go the way that you want to go, or you're not really justifying decisions. So if you lower the age for screening, or if you include a group in a mass screening program like the bowel cancer program that we recently that we had in New Zealand, then you don't really know why you're doing it or the justification from an economics or value perspective.
So it kind of overrides maybe any political bias or
100%.
pressure from outside companies, third-party sponsors.
100%. It's consistent, it's reliable, and it's transparent. So, yeah, it'll stand the test of time, irrespective of which party is in place.
Yeah. Because whenever I think of economic decisions, I mean, the layman might go, oh, that's just about cost. I mean, how much money do I have? What do things cost? Let's just throw money at this. But it's not that simple, is it? I mean, you've got a whole bunch of other factors that you need to put into play. I mean, you mentioned New Zealand-specific examples, Treaty of Waitangi, that kind of thing. What are the other specifics that go into a health economic assessment for? Let's just use an example of a new drug.
Yeah, sure. So look, historically speaking, we've always done the costs matter the most, and that's typically a cost minimization. You're looking only at costs. But of course, we're a health system that wants to maximize value to patients. We want to maximize, health outcomes in terms of life years. We want people to live longer, healthier lives, better quality life of years. So you're essentially wanting to maximize those two aspects in relation to costs. And you think about that, that's simply put as value, right? And we do that as humans all the time. We say, oh, this thing is not worth it if we're willing to buy a new iPad, or this coffee is being sold for $7 a cup of coffee. You think to yourself, well, $7 it exceeds what I'm willing to pay for that particular value that I'm gaining from that coffee. And health is no different in that aspect if you're measuring and counting the right things.
Nice. And it's like over on top, so you've got outcomes, you've got the costs involved, but as you mentioned, you've got your values, not just value, which is kind of implied in cost and outcomes, but like what you value as a society as well. Do we value healthy children, or do we value prevention, or do we value treatment, or do we value longevity?
That's
So
right.
there's all these kind of decisions that get overlaid over the top of the nitty-gritty data that goes into these models.
That's right. Yeah. So that's the strategic direction of what the country values. I mean, look, it's not all about. It's not all about the value for money, because there are things that are being funded that are end-of-life treatment, that allow people to, die with dignity or pass away with dignity, and which we value highly in New Zealand, which I personally agree with in that aspect. So there are things beyond value that go into the scope of things. But I think when we're thinking about making, having a framework for decision making, we want to look at what the value looks like, and then we want to also be able to plug in the other aspects that also matter. So you've got rare conditions as well that tend to get some funding as well, because you're unlucky, you have a rare disease. We don't just sort of kick you to the curb and say good luck. We also look after you.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting, because it's not viewed through a real cold hard lens of numbers.
That's right.
Yeah, there are the
100%
unique decisions or the new values that we make as a society. We aged care. One could argue you're not going to get a huge amount of return on investment, shall we say, in blunt terms.
Yeah.
But that implies that we actually value all our people, whether they're old, young.
That's right.
Healthy, infirm.
Yeah.
Or in the rare disease space as well. I mean, that rolls into the equity side of things.
There needs to be a conversation around all those elements. Yeah. So we obviously see that Māori and Pacifica are disproportionately represented in a number of chronic disease conditions. So the funny part is that looking after these communities is actually a better investment in the long run, because you end up. Disease prevention is actually the way to go for a lot of these populations in any case. So, but if you didn't have that framework, through health economics, then you wouldn't be able to segment that population and look at how value matters differently to different groups.
Yeah, and how does it matter for different groups?
So, for example, it might be more valuable because you might find that certain groups get cancer sooner. They might be diagnosed later in their cancer staging, which means the medication is more expensive. Hospital stays are more expensive. So if you would identify that population sooner, treat them sooner, and get them on the right medication sooner, you're actually then cost shifting a lot of the costs that the health system would have being burdened with down the line. So in fact, they're cost saving in a way.
Yeah, because I think if you were to chart expense versus the time within someone's disease progression time and their disease progression versus cost for treatment, it is probably a very straight positive relationship. So if you get it earlier, much cheaper for the individual and their health in terms of their health outcomes, but also who's paying for treatment, medication, health system. Yeah. So why don't we go through some of the different types of models that a health economist might put together in order to make these arguments for value and funding and that kind of thing.
Cool. So I would consider the most shallow type. Are you talking about the different types, right?
Sure.
So the most shallow type, in my opinion, is sort of cost minimization, because it only takes into account costs and no outcomes. And what we try to do in the health system, we try to maximize outcomes. Another typical one is cost effectiveness analysis, where costs again are in dollars, but the effectiveness is measured in natural units. So if you had a falls prevention program, then it would be dollar per fall prevented. Yep. If you had a program that improved CVD and reduced heart attacks, it would be dollar per heart attack evaded. And so the issue is then what's more important, falls or heart attacks? And it's because you're not using a measure that allows you to compare between those two things. So again, that one is sort of limited. Another common one is cost-benefit analysis, where both costs and outcomes are measured in dollar or monetary units. And the issue with that is that you end up having to put a value on human life, a dollar on human life in terms of life years. So there's some ethical constraints. And then ultimately what you end up with is a cost-utility analysis, where costs are again in dollars and the outcome is measured in the utility score, which is a composite measure that has both quality of life and life years built into it. And so now you're able to look at the falls program and the cardiovascular or heart attack program and say, okay, we're able to translate those outcomes in a common composite measure that is comparable. And so that tends to be the one that Pharmac tends to use. That's the one that we use at Health Economics Consulting. It allows you to be able to nurture the health system going forward to make good decisions.
Is there a place for these blunter measures, like cost minimization analysis? This kind of sounds like, shopping around for a GUL versus,
yes.
Z.
Yeah,
GUL's
so generics
cheaper, do that.
Yeah, so generics at if you have generic medicines where the outcomes are assumed to be similar, then the cost minimization stuff is easy to use.
So as soon as that patent runs out, boom, we're going for the
20
generic.
years later, yeah, you're good to go. You're good to
The
go.
clock starts as soon as...
Yeah, somebody's waiting there with a timer and you're ready to go.
For sure. And then cost effectiveness, like you mentioned, you can't really compare apples with oranges with that, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's the easiest one to do, really, because you just look at your own program, you look at it in a silo, and you're like, okay, well, I'm only going to consider falls because I'm only measuring falls, so I'm just going to do that. But what it does is that it squeezes the health system because it doesn't allow it to be able to compare apples with apples, and it makes a less sort of robust economic argument from the perspective for you.
Right.
Because
So it's almost as though if you're given a budget for falls, you would do a CEA.
Yeah.
But overall, that wouldn't tell you that investing in falls is not a good investment.
Exactly.
Yeah, we're putting money. Sorry,
Exactly.
investment sounds a little bit harsh. But,
Yeah.
Okay, and then CBA, so cost benefit analysis, like you mentioned, that puts a dollar value
On the outcomes as well.
On the outcomes, which, gosh, that sounds like the ultimate in economics.
Yeah, it
Right
does.
there, like everyone is an economic actor. You've got value because you can spend money over your lifetime, so
Yeah.
you're more valuable. But
That's
geez,
right.
it doesn't really incorporate.
That's right.
Yeah.
And then the only other thing that I will add is that to a health economist, using a particular type of economic evaluation tells you a little bit about the perspective in which the analysis is done by. So, for example, with cost-benefit analysis, you might include societal cost, which is time off work, or being able to park your car at the hospital to be able to access your appointment. Those sort of things that the health system doesn't necessarily include as part of its costing.
Right.
Because it's not paying for it.
Yes.
It's not paying for your time off work to get to your appointment to access your cancer treatment.
But that cost is getting paid somewhere.
But somewhere,
Yeah.
And then the cost utility usually implies a health system perspective, where you're looking at it purely from bed days saved, or costs shifted in terms of medication or a new implant of some sort of device. They're not hard lines, obviously, but these are sort of the assumptions that one tends to make when dealing with these types of analyses.
Yeah. So that cost utility, the utility is pivotal in this assessment, right? So it's about how much what the outcomes you receive from the treatment but it's in the defined outcome measurement, right? It's not just some funny number that's been plugged from someone. Oh, you're a 28-year-old male. Your utility is this.
That's right. Yeah, they're known as. The way you collect them is via patient-reported outcome measures, so PROMs. And these come in a form of a questionnaire. There's many different types of questionnaires and different lengths of them. The most important factor is for it to be simple and understandable, and for the patient to actually complete the questionnaire. The most common ones are EQ5D, which is the EuroQoL 5-dimension, 5 levels, and it asks you
So it's
common
quality
questions.
of life, right?
Yeah, quality of life. It asks you common questions like, how's your pain, mobility, self-care, usual care, and anxiety and depression. It obviously doesn't cover, we know health is quite complex, and how people judge their quality of life is quite complex too. But the EuroQoL group, thought to themselves that we got to keep it simple, well-defined. So these 5 metrics tend to be the ones that people value when it comes to ascertaining where they rank on quality of life. So people that tend to have no problems with mobility tend to be better off in quality of life than those that do have problems with mobility.
So is that the EuroQoL 5D, is that right?
EuroQoL 5D, yeah.
5D. So that's 5 dimensions, and there's the SF36.
SF36 is another one.
Yeah, but 36 dimensions, 36 questions?
No, it's not 36 questions.
Oh.
So if you think about 5 dimensions, 5 levels, it's kind of like 5 times 5 is 25, and then you've got an additional couple of states for being dead and alive and whatnot. So the SF36 number is equivalent to the 25 plus some.
Okay.
So it's only a little bit longer. They're kind of interchangeable, really. I mean, there's been mappings between them, done like no tomorrow in the literature. So you're able to use either one openly. I've just had more experience with the EQ5D, and that's why I talk about it in a bit more detail.
I mean, it's quite amazing when you can think that your life can kind of be boiled down to five dimensions, each having 5 questions or 36. But,
Yeah.
I mean, we can't include everything in there, but obviously there's been a lot of research that has gone through it to validate that.
Of course.
That is all we need.
Of course. There's been people that have done PhDs in that area to work out what's the magical number of questions that we should be asking patients. But look, we want a questionnaire that's easy to use, easy to understand, easy to implement. Is kind of the way that we want to go about doing it. It's not going to be a perfect measure. We already know that it lacks aspects in terms of wider worldviews that Māori and Pacifica tend to have. So we already know that there's elements that are missing in that piece. And I would encourage the system to pick up that piece of work. There should be an HRC, a Health Research Council piece of work that could get funded or would get funded to sort of be able to count some of those elements that are important, because we know we're not asking an important question for a whole group of people. So it's not perfect, but I think getting started is the key.
Would there be a case that you'd have a different quality of life assessment cross-culturally? Different cultures have different values. If you've got 25 questions or 36 questions or whatever, one culture might value certain things differently. So you kind of need to get a representative
100%.
Slice from each
and
culture.
They do that. Yeah,
Right.
They do that. So the QoL group samples across different countries and works out different ways of valuing each of the 5 factors, for example, in the EQ5D, because we know that some cultures value pain differently. Yeah. So yeah, totally spot on. Yeah, they do that.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but it almost feels like you need to have some kind of very fancy model that gets the composite outcome from all these different cultural groups.
Yeah.
To arrive at that based on all the individual ones built into a model to. But I suppose it's a bit too complicated to do that, right? You need to get represent.
It's a work in progress, right? Yeah, it's a work in progress. I mean, they're trying their best to sample, internationally. There are specific values to New Zealand, Australia, the UK, so that you're able to access them. And especially if you're using Health Economics, you're using it locally, so within the country that you're looking for. So then you'll use the New Zealand values in New Zealand, and you'll use the Australian values in Australia. So you have some sort of customizability.
Yeah. So, okay, let's assume. So, not assume. We know that the cost utility analysis, that's the gold standard. It's the most widely used, or at least the most widely useful.
Yeah.
So it's cost. So if we look at, should we just use an example of a new drug? So we've got the cost of the new drug to administer to a patient. Say it's 10, 15 grand a year or whatever.
Yeah.
And then you use the quality of life. How does that play into that? Yeah.
So what you try and do is that you look at what does the health system do without the drug existing. So we call that standard care, right? Yep. Standard care. How do patients currently progress through the system? And the way that we refer to that is a patient journey or a patient pathway. So we look at the group that has the condition that you're looking to treat, and we look at them over time as they currently are in place, the standard of care. And we look at if we looked at 100 people that had that condition and we simulated them through time, okay, we look at the costs that they incur and we look at the outcomes that they incur. So we see how long they live for, and we also ask them at important parts of their patient journey, known as clinically or economically relevant parts of their journey. We ask them about their quality of life, and we ask them about whether they, what sort of costing went into that journey. Yep. So if they had a GP visit, if they had a surgery, what currently takes place. And we add all the costs and outcomes associated with that journey. And then what we do is, looking at the clinical trials that we've done with the drugs, we're able to then simulate what would happen if the drug existed in the system. So maybe the likelihood for developing a cancer is reduced as a result of the drug. Maybe the mortality rate has decreased as a result of using the drug. So then ultimately, if the mortality rate has decreased, then people are living longer and they're accumulating more quality of life over time. Yep. So then we're able to accumulate baseline, we're able to accumulate the intervention, cost and outcomes, and then we're able to subtract those from each other and work out some sort of ratio as $1 per QALY.
Okay. And the quality, that's the quality adjusted life
year?
Okay,
yeah, quality adjusted life year.
So if you're on a cancer treatment and it extends your life for 10 years, and the quality is, it's not just the duration of life But it's also the quality of that
of those
interval,
years,
right?
yeah. So if you look for an extra 10 years, we would look at each of those years, what was the quality of life within those years. So for example, we tend to find that those on earlier stage cancer tend to have a higher quality of life than those with late stage cancer, which makes sense. Yeah.
Right. So if I'm in perfect health, I've got is it 100% quality of life or is it a 1.0?
Yeah. So
life?
it's between 0 and 1. I mean, if you can look at it 0 to 100 and then divide by 100, which is the same thing. But yeah, between 0 and 1, and it gives you. So if you filled in the questionnaire and you said I've got no problems with pain, no problems with mobility, no problems with self care, usual care, and depression and anxiety, then you get a score of a 1.
Right.
And then anything below that, you get subtracted numbers off that as you go into the lower levels.
So like a quality adjusted life year would be the quality of life times by the number of years. So if my normal experience, say on standard of care, would be, I mean, let's use a harsh example. I'm late stage cancer. I might live for 5 years at a 0.2 quality of life. 0.2 times 5, that's a 1 quality adjusted life year. Say with a new intervention, I live for 10 years. And the average quality of life is 0.5. That's 0.5 times 10. So it's a 5.
That's right.
Quality adjusted life year. So the gain is 4.
It's 4.
Right. And you compare the gain versus the
cost.
Increased cost.
Yeah.
Nothing's ever cheaper, is it? So you've got an increased cost of this newfangled drug that makes me live for additional 5 years at a lot better quality of life.
Yeah.
So say it's 200 grand, divide that by the quality, is that quality adjusted life year?
That's right. Yeah, the marginal qualities, yeah. So, I mean, the thing is, the drug might be really, really expensive, but maybe it actually prevented you from going to hospital. So imagine the standard of care was actually that you spent 2 weeks in hospital at $3,000 a day. Then that's expensive compared to maybe the drug, which was only $12,000. So you actually might be in a the intervention might be what's known as dominant, which is where it reduces costs. The difference in cost is actually a negative, and then also improves QALYs. So then that's positive, and then therefore you're in a realm that's sort of magical for a drug company or the person who's supplying this particular intervention. It's very good to be in that space.
Oh, I never thought about it like that. Of course, I mean, if without doing that, you could really overlook the utility, the benefit, the cost savings of some of this new technology that's coming through, right?
That's right.
Yeah, you just go, oh my gosh, who's going to pay for this? This is $1 million per dose, or
that's right.
Some of these new gene therapies, Jesus, it's just eye-watering how much they cost. But
that's right.
Over the lifetime of someone's life, and they're also paying taxes, ideally.
That's right, yeah.
And they're not going into hospital, and they're not requiring a huge amount of interventions or assistance.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
And the cool thing is that you can actually factor in, I mean, the exercise can be somewhat theoretical. So you could say, look, what if we had a miracle drug that we were developing and that it reduced, mortality for sort of lung cancer by 15%. How much money should we be investing in a program that might look into that reduction by 15%? So you can kind of work out R&D costs as well. So you could say, actually, we should be willing to pay roughly $4 million a year every single year for the next 10 years to work out a new intervention that actually reduced that mortality by 15% because it's worth the investment in terms of the life years and the quality of life that we would then get access to as a result of people living longer, healthier lives. And
you're saying that from the perspective of a sponsor or a government or
you can do it either way. So whoever's doing the analysis really, or whoever's coming up with the sort of intervention, you could actually work it out backwards, where you could work out the how much R&D that you could spend on that. Yeah. That's why it's a framework for decision making, because it allows you to make informed decisions about where your money should be going.
Yeah. No, amazing. Especially, I think when we're coming up to the 2023 elections, but everything always seems to get politicized. But this kind of takes the politics out of it. It's got numbers.
That's right.
Yes, it's got numbers, sure, and everyone likes numbers. But it's got values and it's got quality of life, and it also has a very long, wide lens that we can view the benefits, but also the costs in, and compare it to what we're doing now, and go, hang on, guys, we need to rethink this. Yeah. Either as a company or as
a health system.
A health system, yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So there's would the analyses be different based on who was doing it? So say I am let's just use a sponsor company, or a pharmaceutical company. Mm-hmm. Would I be creating these models to present to a payer, so like Pharmac or an insurance company, or do I do this like a bit like what you've alluded to figure out if something is even worth investing into as well?
You can do it at every step of the way. So, for example, if you're a company based in New Zealand developing a health product, it would be advantageous of you to undertake your own economic evaluation of your product, because then that way it allows you to understand the value of your product. So when you make your value proposition to a company like Pharmac or Te Whatu Ora or whoever you want reimbursement from, then you'll have a good, sound economic argument for your particular product. Now, if you're Pharmac, you're already doing economic evaluations. You're trying to understand that the person at the front door wanting, selling their product, and you're wanting to buy their product, that it's actually a good investment for the health system. We're wanting to work more with investors who are now investing in health technology companies to understand the value proposition. Because if investors understand that a company is going to have a good value product from the perspective of the health system, then they're more willing to invest in it because there's someone who's going to buy your product, really. So you can do it at every step of the way. You can do it at the company level. You can do it at the health system level. But ultimately, the health system will need to do this if it's investing in technology. And that's what Pharmac tends to do. They're going to take on medical devices in the coming time. I mean, they're already taking on, it's a work in progress to take on devices for Pharmac. But yeah, they're going to be doing this sort of stuff day in, day out. Yeah.
So it's never too early if you're a company with the intention of developing a pharmaceutical product. There's no too early point to start doing these types of analyses.
I mean, it'll be a business strategy question, right? Because you're paying for advice, right? Our consulting fee is based on advice, right? So we give you advice on what your product, from an objective point of view, what your product's value is, and you, depending on what your journey looks like as the company, you'll want to say, is it a good time to invest money in advice now, or should we hold off and actually invest that money in developing the product, or getting getting our pipeline properly structured, our supply chain is all sorted. What's the timing of it?
And insurance companies, they do this as well? I mean, maybe not so much in New Zealand, or?
Yeah, they say they do. They've got some stuff on their websites that I've read, the one-pager. Now, we haven't
mentioned
really...
there's 11 of you health economists in the country.
Very few health economists doing this kind of work. Look, I know that ACC has a economist who is interested in health. Whether that means the same thing, I'm not 100% sure, but she's awesome. She's great. If she's still there. So I don't know if they're doing these types of analyses. I don't know if it makes sense for them to do these types of analyses. They've got a different sort of cost structure and revenue stream that they're trying to maximize. So they don't tend to do it in the same capacity. But we worked with companies that have a particular product that looks at pain, for example. And I know that ACC is specifically interested in pain. So there's going to be some sort of idea around, because if you're free of pain, then you're able to work. So there's that sort of relationship going on in that particular space. So they don't necessarily use them explicitly into the same fashion that other parts of the health system do, but here's hoping.
Nice. Oh, so going back to a sponsored company that has a drug, imagine this. You mentioned it's a simulation. So you plug in a series of numbers into what I imagine is a very beautiful, well-structured model with a series of assumptions in it as well, because you will never have the perfect picture, particularly if it's early stage. And then over the life cycle of what you're developing, you can rerun it, optimize it, further substantiate the evidence, the argument. I imagine sometimes the lens might change though as well over time. Like there might be different values. You might get some results that don't show something that obviates something that you had previously.
100%.
So it's an iterative process is what I'm saying.
100%. Yeah. You're never going to do a clinical trial that has all of the answers for your study, and obviously not long enough to be able to sort of tease out the things that you want to be able to tease out. So you can kind of build the model and then put in information, some from your clinical trial, a lot from literature reviews that you're able to do in meta-analyses and different types of data. A lot of it can be expert opinion, and then you can backlog and update a lot of that data. Yeah, it's a continuously growing model. It takes into account what currently takes place, but what currently takes place in the health system might change as well. So you might need to pivot in terms of that in those aspects. So yeah, there's a lot of it's always a work in progress.
And I imagine if you've got a randomized control trial, I presume that's the gold standard of data, right? So it's obviously well controlled versus a placebo or a standard of care. And you're taking snapshots. The patients are coming in monthly, and you're getting a read on how expensive their journey is. The fine points that you mentioned, also quality of life from those questionnaires. But also different. If you're doing a big randomized control trial, that's done globally.
Yeah,
and
multi-centered.
different healthcare systems in different countries rather operate differently. So do you have to make an adjustment for that if you're applying the argument for just New Zealand, for example?
Yeah, you would have to build a model for each country, or each country if it was unique in how patients flowed through the system. That's sort of I mean, obviously costs are going to be different in terms of the dollar value and all that other jazz with exchange rates, but how patients flow through a health system really matters. So if you have a X-ray or an MRI in a health system that doesn't exist elsewhere, obviously that's costs and outcomes that are then not being taken into account. That are really important. Yeah, so multi-center trials are very, very good. But you have to kind of go, which market am I going to enter that I'm going to need an economic evaluation for? And you got to keep in mind as well that clinical trials aren't always possible. So, for example, you can't randomly, you can't do an RCT with a medical device, for example, because the person knows if they've got the particular device as such. Yeah, so it's not always possible, but there are a standard of assumptions that you can and can't make, should and shouldn't make, and then ones that you can kind of leverage off going forward.
Right. So if the other end of the spectrum, so randomized controlled trials, gold standard data, case studies being the least gold?
I mean, look, you don't want to run into the problem of selection bias, right? You've got companies that are trying to show good value for a particular product. They pick the patient that they think is going to really benefit from their intervention, and then that becomes the sort of glory story around it. But you already know that that's going to be biased, and that wouldn't fly necessarily. So you'd have to have some sort of structure around the types of people that are being selected, the reasons that they're being omitted from trials, even if it's a single arm trial. So you have to do your due diligence. You have to actually have all your pieces together.
It'd be a bit like selecting an expert witness for a jury trial,
That's right.
And they just, okay, this guy's going to say what I want him to say, or this lady definitely knows her stuff, if you know what I mean.
Exactly.
Whereas, randomized control trial completely controls for those confounders.
Exactly. Yeah. The only other issue that I will add is that sometimes there's a long list of exclusion criteria for control trials, because obviously they don't want people with comorbidities, but the reality is that human beings do have comorbidities. So if the trial excludes really important things, and then you want the health system to include those people that receive that intervention, it might not have the same intended consequences as the trial itself. So you got to be careful. You got to actually have to, you have to be careful with what you're doing.
Yeah, because there's always the argument that even in a phase 3 study, you've got 300 patients, whatever, globally, and you're on the cusp of registering your product and getting marketing authorization.
Yeah.
But then you read through the exclusion criteria, and it is for the patient's benefit and also to make sure that you get the right data that you want
100%.
Without confounders. But whenever you go into the real world, the patient sample is patient profile on average is very different to that, which is not very different. It's comparable, but there are additional factors at play versus the clinical trial. So I imagine you would stress test or benchmark or compare the modeling that you got for your QoL and your cost with post-marketing data as well?
Yeah, I mean, look, what we tend to find is that the initial group of people that receive the intervention tend to be a curated group of people, a bit more restriction around who they are, and then the second phases of clinical trials tend to be a bit broader, to be able to show value for a wider population. So again, you can always update the prevalence and the incidence and the quality of life and the costs associated with different groups, if they were indeed different to your initial selected population. So you kind of have to do your due diligence over time. Yeah.
Okay, so we've got say we're, again, coming back to an example, we've got our cost, we've got our QALYs, we've got our we've got our innovative drug versus the standard of care. What is the number that punches out the other end of this model?
So
cost, incremental cost per marginal QALY?
So it's known as an ICER, an incremental cost effectiveness ratio. Where it's laced, the Health Economics is laced with acronyms. I try not to use them as much as I can. So it's known as an ICER, an incremental cost effectiveness ratio, which is $1 per QALY, $1 per quality adjusted life year from moving from the baseline to the new intervention. So you get a point that shows you essentially what you're paying for and how much you're paying for an outcome by moving from the standard practice to the new intervention, by adopting the new intervention.
And most likely that will be an incremental cost, but an incremental effectiveness via the QoL. But there might be some unicorn magical examples that are actually lower cost over the time course of.
So because you're doing a difference at the top of the equation with the difference in costs, and then you're dividing it by a difference in outcomes in terms of QALYs, what you end up doing is that you can either divide two positive numbers, two negative numbers, or a combination of both.
Yeah.
Right, and then that will give you either a positive or a negative number, and it'll allow you to plot that on a plot to show you, where you fit into the world. So if you get a positive number, it doesn't necessarily mean that you divided just a positive by a positive. It could be a negative by a negative.
Yeah. Then you're worse off in both counts.
Which what it means is that your new intervention saves you money, but it also has a negative impact on your population in terms of quality of life or life years, or a combination of both.
So do you map it on like a quadrant, and then you've got
That's
this
exactly
is
it.
what you want over here, down here, negative. Okay. Cost, right.
Yeah. So you don't want to, as an intervention, you don't want to be in the northwest quadrant, because northwest, it's hard to imagine, I know, but the northwest means that you as the intervention is dominated. It means you cost the system money, but you are reducing outcomes for patients. So that's the least desirable place. That's going to be get out of here. No one wants to invest in your product. And then the northeast, the southeast quadrant is where you always want to be, which is the no-brainer investment.
Right. Lower cost, better outcomes.
Better outcomes,
better quality. Oh, yeah, true.
And then the two quadrants that are left over are actually trade-off quadrants. They're known as the northeast one represents spending more but getting more, which is what kind of makes sense most of the time. Yep. And then the southwest is spend less, get less. Conversations. But our advice to clients is either you want to be in the dominant quadrant, or you want to be in the trade-off. Within a reasonable space. Yeah,
and if you're in the trade-off quadrants, is there a number that is kind of well accepted as the benchmark? Like how much money are we willing to pay extra per QoL, I guess, as well.
QoL, yeah. So, man, these are some heavy themes that we're going through. We had a whole workshop on this across 6 hours to get some of these concepts across. But look, putting it simply, the way we describe it is that by investing in a product, you are paying for a particular outcome, a return on an outcome. And so in theory, you would be there should be a willingness to pay for that particular outcome. And the way I always describe it with my clients is that you're buying a cup of coffee, and you think to yourself, I am willing to pay only a certain amount for a cup of coffee. And if it exceeds that amount, then I would not be willing to pay for it. If it's below it, then I would always be willing to invest in that cup of coffee, depending on the value that it brings.
What's your inflection point, by the way?
Huh?
What's your inflection point? For me, it's $5.
Yeah, $5.
If it's more than $5, get out of here.
Yeah. Well, I just drink long black, so I mean, if you're adding bells and whistles like milk, then it could be a little bit more expensive. But yeah, $5 is a good sweet point. For me. But from the perspective of the health system, look, different countries have different willingness to pay for QALYs. The UK is the one that sort of put its hand up and said, look, it's 30,000 pounds per QALY. Okay. So we have a slope, and anything that's below that slope is of good investment. Anything above that is unlikely to get funded or to get reimbursed. In New Zealand, there isn't a clear-cut number. And that's done for a couple of reasons. One, Pharmac wants to be able to fund medication like end-of-life treatment that might be 300,000 per QALY that it wouldn't otherwise get through if you sort of stay to the line or to the slope. But roughly speaking, it's between 15 and 25,000 per QALY. That's the stuff that's kind of on their schedule now. There's a public Pharmac schedule which you're able to check out all of the things that are funded. And then if you did the economic evaluation for those particular interventions, you'd find that roughly it's between 15 and 25,000 per QALY. In the States, it's about 50,000 USD per QALY, and it can go up from there.
Of course, the Americans want to outspend everyone, right?
Yeah. So the higher your willingness to pay for a product, then the higher the price of that particular intervention will be.
Yeah. I mean, it's quite sobering to talk about these kind of, as mentioned, heavy themes. You're talking about the value of someone's life, essentially, and what you're willing to put money towards. But I always find it quite heartwarming, is it the right word to say, that there are exceptions. We do place a value on end of life. We do place a value on various other things. So there are exceptions to the rule. But I imagine, putting my devil's advocate hat on, if you publish a benchmark which kind of says if you are below this gradient, we will approve it or we will fund it. Does that kind of prime companies to be like, oh, this is how much we can definitely sell our product for?
100%, yeah. I mean, look, there's going to be advantages and disadvantages of having a line, implicit or explicitly defined.
Yep.
And I think the way that New Zealand operates at the moment, it's because there needs to be better comms around the structure of cost utility analyses, what goes into it, what was the baseline comparator, etc. So people understand. But otherwise, a lot of times you feel like it's a black box that you can't quite understand. But I think the way that it's currently done is pretty good. Yeah, I'm a big fan.
That's good.
If you can't tell,
Yeah.
I'm a big fan. Yeah.
Well, that actually is a nice segue to what prompted you to start Health Economics Consulting. I mean, you are number 11 of 11 health economists in the country.
Yeah. Look, I was working with my supervisor and mentor, Richard Edlin from the University of Auckland, top guy. Brilliant dude. And he, when I was working with him for 6 months after my master's, he said, "Oh, look, there's a client that actually needs a bit of help. I can't service them. Did you want to service them?" And at the time, I thought, yeah, sure, like let's give it a go. Just came off my master's, high enthusiasm levels, big student loan, so totally keen. And the company said to me, and this is Caldera Health at the time, they said to me, "Oh, look, we can either do it, with you individually, or we could do it through the university." And the university was taking a 40% overhead, which I thought, I'm not really keen on that. Yeah, so I said, look, well, let's just do it separately, through our own agreement. And so I had to get formal with the way I structured myself. So it was either a sole trader or a company. And I thought, you know what, I have a feeling that I would want to scale and I would want to bring people on board. So why not just dive into the company side of things? And that's how I registered the company, built a website through Squarespace or whatever it was at the time, and sort of got the ball rolling in that aspect. But yeah, it kind of just came together in there, and then it was word of mouth that we were able to continue.
So it's almost like getting the start. You just need someone to give you the leg up, give you the opportunity, give you the first go, and you're away.
Yeah,
especially with stuff like this, we don't need a huge amount of capital investment for
starting a
stock.
company. Yeah. I think it was like $18 or so to register a company.
It's pretty steep, man.
Yeah.
I'm kidding.
And the cool thing is, I mean, I thought that I would always wanted to do something in starting a company or at least managing a team or a product or something along those lines. And then it just worked out the way that it worked out.
And what did Caldera Health require? Were they looking for a cost utility analysis type of thing?
So they wanted. I mean, the cool thing is that people know that they need a health economist, but they don't really know why. So they can kind of. It's a weird relationship. They'll come to us and say, "Oh, we need a health economist. We've been told that we need a health economist, but can you actually convince us also why we need you?" So we have to kind of sit down and say, "Actually, there's all these different types of economic evaluations that exist. Are you looking to enter the New Zealand market? Who do you want to sell to ultimately?" And then we kind of guide them along the way. But the client initially doesn't know a whole heap beyond needing a health economist, which is a good and bad thing.
Yeah, good opportunity for you to be the knight on the white horse type of thing.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. And Caldera Health, what do they have?
So they had a diagnostic tool for prostate cancer.
That's right, yeah.
Now, unfortunately, they actually did end up going out of business for various reasons. But yeah, they had a diagnostic tool for prostate cancer. The cancer space is really interesting because you can either die with cancer or from cancer. And so if you have a really good tool that identifies people that wouldn't have otherwise died from the cancer, but died with the cancer itself, it means that they're not really costing the health system any money.
Yeah.
So if you end up identifying them, you end up overtreating them, and then that's a whole heap of cost that the health system wouldn't have otherwise incurred. So it's kind of, I mean, the way it's a magical, it's between a rock and a hard place space by being a diagnostic tool in the cancer space.
Yeah, so I imagine it's a lot easier with a drug company, medical device company.
Yeah.
The argument is a bit more clear, easier to comprehend and understand.
100%.
Yeah. Any other awesome examples that you have from your work at HEC?
One that I think is quite notable is a company called the Insides Company, and they've developed a chyme refeeding pump for those that are have a fistula or have suffered from colorectal cancer. Yeah. It's a New Zealand-based company.
It's Professor Greg O'Grady, right?
Greg O'Grady and Garth Sutherland is the CEO. Top guys. World leaders in that field, and that's a disruptive technology. No real comparator. Baseline basically standard of care is getting people into hospital and giving them a drip feeding nutrition. Yep. Whereas now they're able to have a pump that able to circulate a lot of that material that would have otherwise, all the nutrition that would have otherwise left the body is now able to be refeeded, and it's a very disruptive technology. So we help them with their cost utility analysis.
And in that case, when there's no comparator, how did you do the analysis there?
So the comparator can be either something or nothing. In this situation, it was kind of something, but you look at whatever is the most common way that people get by in the health system. So there might not be a other pump that's in that space, but they had medication as an alternative that essentially patients were being put on.
Yeah, so it's like you mentioned earlier, it's the cumulative costs for whatever is done as the standard of care at that point in time.
Yeah. Very, very disruptive tech. Cool people to work with. Really good.
So I've got Professor Greg O'Grady and Hani Yi as well from Elementary in a couple of weeks' time. That'll be fun. Yeah,
you honestly have a star-studded list. Yeah, they're really, really cool.
Got some heavy hitters from the industry. Fantastic. Because like yourself, there's so many people with such great knowledge that we need to pass on. We need to inspire people. We need to share it. I feel like the industry is very, not ivory towers, that has a negative connotation, but it's so technical that it's difficult to get it across in a short period of time.
Yep.
Nay, impossible. So we need these kind of long form conversations.
Yeah.
We don't want to wait for some $300, $500, $700 convention to hear from these awesome people. It needs to be on demand. So on demand. Sorry team.
No, you're totally right. You want people to be able to access these. You want to have an archive that people can listen to and to the stories. Some of these conversations tend to happen at, for example, Health Tech Week. There were some really cool conversations that would have been awesome as in a podcast format. That then you're able to kind of go back and go, oh, actually that story is really, really cool. It would resonate with a lot of people, and you only got to experience it if you were there. Yeah,
absolutely. Oh, man, so good. All right, let's bring this one home. Where can people find more about you, Health Economics Consulting?
Oh, man, Look, our website's actually under construction at the moment. It kills me to say that. It actually kills me to say that. Yeah, our website's under construction at the moment. But LinkedIn, I'm very active. Health Economics Consulting is very active on LinkedIn, so we do share a lot of that content. I
saw that you were in Christchurch, last week. Was that a little event that you put together?
Yeah, so we're hosting a workshop in conjunction with Te Tuki Mataora and Callahan Innovation, to be able to support some of their clients coming through the system that have a particular health intervention or a product that they need help commercializing. We ran a workshop in Christchurch, 6 hours. It was really, really good. 16 participants, I think. We've got another Auckland one planned on the 10th of October. Nice. We're doing a research-based one with the University of Auckland at the end of this month as well. So we're really just trying to disseminate the health economics and decentralize it really, so that people know about it. They know that these are the things that they should be considering when getting into the space.
And how can people find out about that and register?
It should be on it. Yeah, there should be on it. There are some LinkedIn stuff. If you actually sign up to the Health Tech Activator via Callahan Innovation website, those have some really good workshops and other events that are, I think, very, very pivotal to people in this space. I think those are pretty good places to sort of get involved.
Awesome. Yeah, I think we definitely need more health economists. We need more people aware of what goes into these big decisions. We need more people aware of the requirements around the transparency and openness. We need more transparency and openness. And without the people doing it, without the people understanding it, we're probably going to potentially miss out on that. So just to finish up, what's your hope for the future of Health Economics Consulting for New Zealand? companies?
I mean, look, I just want. I mean, what do I want? I want people to be able to, access the information and know that it's actually quite digestible, and that there is some technical stuff, but the majority of information is actually really easily accessible. If you go onto the Pharmac website and type, pharmacoeconomic analysis, or for health economics, if you just type PFPA. Pharmac into Google, it's the first document, and it's a very, very, very digestible, easy to use format, sort of documentation that outlines all of the things in layman's terms. It's not a technical document by any means, where you're able to access all that information and get the ball rolling. But I think for us, the actual dream long term is to actually have a master's or PhD level program at the university. That's how I know that health economics has won. That first phase is if the university. Any university on board has a master's level program. Game changer, because if we're able to produce health economists locally, I think we're going to be in a very, very good space.
Nice. Awesome. All right. Well, thanks so much for coming on to Chat GCP, Abbas.
Thanks for
it's
having
been an
me.
absolute pleasure.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Keep an eye out for Abbas's appearances on LinkedIn. I know he's very active. Always love your content, and I'm looking forward to working with you in some shape or form in the future, man.
Thank you. Likewise.
Cheers.
Cheers.